Dive into the pulse of Bills football with Turf to Tape, where veteran sideline reporters Sal Capaccio and film room guru Erik Turner deliver a one-of-a-kind podcast experience, combining Sal's unparalleled access to players and coaches with Erik's razor-sharp film breakdowns. The show bridges the gap between casual fans and hardcore enthusiasts. This is Turf to Tape.
This is Turf to Tape, presented by Thin Man Brewery. I'm your host, Erik Turner, as always, joined by the guy that lives at the intersection of access and insight, Sal Capaccio from WGR. What's going on, Sal?
Well, it was a long weekend in Chicago, a fun weekend, a good weekend. Got to do a lot of cool stuff, but that obviously didn't end the way that Bills fans wanted it to end, 38-0. Got back overnight, late last night, back on the grind today to kind of, react to it. And that's what we like to do, right, Erik? I mean, I think that there's a lot of context you can get when you go back and watch film, and you can kind of look at things, and we love to do that. But there's also a lot of instant reactions before you forget them that are top of mind that you want to get to.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're going to be breaking down that shellacking that the Bills took from the Bears in Chicago. And I thought it was interesting just from the beginning of the game and how lucky we were to have Greg Olsen on the call, because he's phenomenal when it comes down to making a complex game simple and digestible for the average fan, which is kind of what we try to do here in Turf to Tape. And I thought he nailed down exactly the approach that both of these teams had. And so I want to get your thoughts on the Bills approach versus the Bears approach in this preseason game.
Yeah, I don't know what Greg Olsen said. I'm glad that that happened. My thought was it was a 4-day event, right? It was a 2-day event for the two teams. We were there for 4 days, counting Thursday. But I think their approaches were different considering the 2 days. There was a joint practice on Friday. There was a game on Sunday. I think the Bills took the approach of, we're going to get everything we can to get in efficiently done on Friday. If we do that, if we're comfortable with what we've seen from our starters, from Josh Allen, then we can back off them on Sunday, which we saw, right? Get a good 2+ hour practice in, make sure we're getting buttoned up, do all that teamwork. I mean, a joint practice, they're all different, Erik, as you know, and just some insight for people. Like when the Bills went to Pittsburgh last year, there was a lot of one-on-one wide receiver DB work. There was pass rush. There was inside drill. Didn't get a lot of that this time. There was mostly team, mostly 7 on 7, 11 on 11. There was no wide receiver DB work. So it was a lot. It was 2.5 hours of Josh Allen getting reps and Caleb Williams getting reps. And that was really good. And that was really efficient. And I think the Bills kind of were really happy with how that went. And that gave an opportunity for their second and third string, where guys are battling for jobs, to go out there, make sure that the starters don't get hurt. And then they kind of can see where they are in the evaluation. I think the Bears, you go back to last week, they had a joint practice against the Dolphins. They were super physical against the Dolphins. Everybody said that they were when I was there watching. And they've kind of carried that. That's been a mantra. They have a new head coach. They're trying to instill a culture. They're trying to really instill the physicality. And I think that every time they step on the field against another opponent, they're trying to do that. And to me, Sunday was an extension of all of that for them from Friday, whereas the Bills, it wasn't an extension. It was kind of a new way to look at what they wanted to see.
I think that nails it home. Honestly, Olsen said during the broadcast that there were very different approaches between both teams and that the Bears took it very serious. I think, like you said, that maybe the Bills treated the Friday practice a lot different than what we saw publicly, as fans in the preseason game yesterday. A lot of the starters played in the scrimmage, as you just alluded to. And even McDermott, after the game yesterday, said that he was really looking for the starters to be healthy for the season. And so they didn't want to risk that in the preseason game. And if you go back and watch some of the film, which I'm sure a lot of you fans will today, you're going to see that there were a lot of players in different positions, and they moved guys around, whether you're talking interior defensive line, guys that are normally nose tackles, kicked out to a little 3-tech. You saw the offensive line was shuffled around completely, which is when you watch that film, you can see that they did struggle at times, especially versus the Bears starters. But I thought it was an obvious, approach by the Bills to evaluate some of the depth players. And to be honest, I think it was a smart move when you consider some of those younger impact players who we're going to talk about along the D line or along the defense altogether that could play big roles as we move forward in this season. So seeing them up against starters was a good evaluation for this team.
No doubt. And listen, I think the defense going against a Ben Johnson coached offense is a really good test for them. There's a lot of different things that Ben Johnson's going to do. And it's especially going back to Greg Olson's comment and what I just said, they're treating this a little differently. They're probably, I'm not going to go and say they game planned, but I'm sure they put in a few wrinkles they wanted to see and said, hey, let's simulate kind of what we're doing a little bit in a game if we're going against this type of defense. So I think that's good. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's good for the Bills to see something like that. And then up front, yeah, I mean, listen, Sean said if he could just put Josh in bubble wrap, he would do that, but you can't always do that. You got to give some work. And we know they don't want to play Josh Allen. It doesn't look like he's going to play at all in the preseason. They did have different offensive linemen in there. And it's funny, you really do have to work. We talk about safeties a lot for the Bills, and we will talk about safety episode. But we always talk about how they work in tandem. It's so true with the offensive line. The offensive line is such a unit together. And when you are missing 2 or 3 guys, or you have 2 or 3 guys different, it impacts everybody, all 5 units. So a lot of times that's when you don't get them playing as well. Not an excuse, not acceptable the way the Bills played. No doubt about that. Sean McDermott made that clear, and I agree with that. But I do think that you have to take the entire Friday through Sunday into account when you evaluate what they did this week.
And one of the fans of the show wanted me to ask you, since you were at both events, and I kind of think I know where you're going to go with this answer, but do you think the Bills thought one was more important than the other? And if so, which one do you think holds more weight on the actual personnel decisions for the offense, defense, and special teams?
Yeah, I don't know about important. I think that's a key word. It's a tricky word. One was more important. I think anytime you step on the field and you're doing your job, and it's important, right? So I don't think anyone was more important. But I do think that the Friday practice was a gauge of what they want to do on Sunday. So that tells me that was very important for them to get their job done, to be efficient. What would have happened? I don't know the answer to this specifically, Eric, but what if the Bills coaches felt they just did not look good on Friday? Would we have seen the starters on Sunday, right? I mean, I do think that could have been on the table because we didn't know who was going to play until really before game on Sunday. And Sean McDermott kind of alluded to that on Friday. So I don't know about if it was more important on Friday, but I think Friday was very important for the Bills. And here's why. You can put those guys in different situations. You can script plays, and you can, the two sides know this is what we're going to do, 7 on 7, 11 on 11, red zone here and there. So you got a lot more work on Friday. And evaluation is an interesting one because I think Sunday's evaluation meant a lot to a lot of guys, but you can go rely on what you saw Friday when you saw maybe more reps, and in certain situations you want to put them in.
I think that's a great point, Sal. And the coaches have a lot more control in those controlled practice scrimmages that they had with the Bears. They can, again, hey, this is a 3rd down and long scenario, and they can script different plays and insert different players into those actual plays to get a good look and say, okay, this doesn't work, or this player doesn't work in this concept. For example, in the games, it's more of less game planning, right? And we're going to talk about that. Less game planning, go play and try to play fast. But in this game, I think that was the main issue, that the depth players in this game for the Bills were thinking too much. You could see them half a click behind, a little slow. They weren't playing fast, as is typically the case that you hear from McDermott and his staff. They want these guys not thinking. They want them playing fast. Even if they're making mistakes, they're making them fast. And I thought in this game, the 2nd, 3rd wave type players on the depth chart really didn't do that. They didn't recognize a lot of the route concepts, the blocking concepts, processing run the pass, and that slowed them down. They were pushed back off the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They couldn't disengage from blocks. Just simple stuff that McDermott talked about when it comes to fundamentals. And that led to some big plays, which is a big no-no in this defense. 6 pass plays over 20 yards, 3 over 25 yards. Just not the type of football, especially we're talking on the defensive side of the ball, that we expect from the Bills and the McDermott-led defense.
Yeah, and the one thing you said there that Sean McDermott will really get upset about is, and he opened up his press conference with this, like he is a very big believer in line of scrimmage, right? And you establish each line. And I know it's old football guy talk, right? That's what we tell you about all the time. Yeah, rah, rah, establish the line of scrimmage. But the Bills and Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, like the organization really believes in that. That's why they built their offensive line the way they have. They want to make sure that they can run the ball at people and protect their quarterback. And they know that's why they poured some of the resources they have in the defensive line. It hasn't always worked at times in the past when they've done that, but it's very key for them. It's important for them to be able to do that. And I think physically not winning the line of scrimmage on Sunday night is going to bother Sean McDermott even more than maybe some of the other things, like maybe a missed tackle here or there, right? Sure. That's something that he holds dear and believes that you have to win football games. So because of that, like, the way this goes, Eric, like it doesn't matter on the scoreboard for record wise. So this is the perfect scenario for a coach to really do what he needs to do now to get back at practice, right? No, do you want to go home 38-0 flying back from Chicago? No, nobody wants to do that. But it gives Sean McDermott a chance to have a wake-up call this week and really do what he needs to do at practice to kind of show them that they're not where they need to be.
So if with this outing, do you think that these starters play reps next week?
I don't. I do think it's a good question. Matt Bovey and I just did our pod this morning, and Matt brought up the scenario of, could Sean be sending a message next week? I just think the risk would outweigh the reward. And I think Sean McDermott would look at it that way. If he's not going to play Josh Allen in the first 2 preseason games, I think it's just probably off the table. You're playing him in the 3rd preseason game. It just wouldn't make sense to me. And on top of that, who are you sending a message to? It wasn't those guys who were out there. Right. To me, the message that needs to be sent needs to be the guys who are out there. Hey, you weren't good enough. Go put better stuff on film. To me, it's those guys that need to play.
That's a fantastic point. Yeah, that's the message that needs to be sent. If a message is going to be sent, it's going to be to those depth players that got a lot of the reps in this game. And I thought that the Bears and, the coordinator of the Bears did a great job of attacking that second level of the Bills defense. Guys that, again, Joe Andreessen, Dorian Williams, Codrington, 3 guys that they struggled in coverage in this game. And I thought that the Bears came directly at them, whether they're in their drop back game or the play action game. But specifically, I thought that the play action game and the 3-level passing concepts where you have a guy going deep, a guy running a crosser, in-breaker over the middle, and the guy underneath, I thought they saw how well the Bills communicated and passed off a lot of that stuff last week. And we're like, oh, we have some really nice wrinkles for this, where it looks like we're sending, a deep post, but we're actually going to send them to the corner and kind of reverse things. And so I thought there was some, I don't want to say the game plan, but they have some really nice leverage adjustments to coverage and leverage that allowed them to do some big things and attack that second level, a second level that I think kind of goes underrated when we talk about playmaking in the Bills defense, if it's Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and Taron Johnson.
Yeah, a couple things there. I'll start with the Bears point. It's a good point. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with a new coach, in this case, Ben Johnson, wanting to instill confidence, wanting to instill, this is a team, an organization that we know, like last year, like it just did not go well with their young quarterback. And there wasn't a good relationship there, the head coach and him. And they've been going through quarterbacks. They've been going through coaches so if Ben Johnson wants to go in there, this is how he wants to run, his preseason and give his guys confidence. Who am I to say it's the wrong way? It might be, that's exactly right. So it might look uneven because the other team's not doing it that way with the Sean McDermott team that he's been here 9 years. He's got this quarterback. He doesn't have to play him. So things are going to get a bit uneven there. That's fine. But the basic fundamentals of football still have to be there for the Bills, and they weren't in a lot of ways. And let's go back to Friday. I really like the pass rush on Friday. I did not like coverage. And that coverage that I saw on Friday carried over into Sunday. Exactly what you said, Eric. That second level, right over the linebackers, that gap between the safety and linebackers, that mid-level zone area. And it's not just zones. There were some man-to-man coverages. I didn't think Trey White had a great Friday on a couple of man-to-man coverages he was in. Christian Benford got beat on one, but he made a nice play at the end to kind of get the guy out of bounds before he could actually corral it. So that's an area of concern for me. And it might start with the safeties. And I know that's been the talk with everybody today. And Cole Bishop, we see Heather is in the chat right now. Bishop feels a little like Elam. I think that's a little premature, but no, I understand. If you watch last night and say, man, safeties are a concern, that was the area of the field right in front of them, right at the linebacker level over them, where it was showing up.
So the Bills overall last year, they had struggled against play action, as I just talked about. And we saw that again yesterday. 9 plays last year of 25 yards or more against play action. That was the ninth highest. 18 over 20 yards against play action. That was kind of mid league there, 16th overall. So why do they struggle against play action? And maybe why did they struggle so much yesterday or even in Friday's practice when we're talking play action in that intermediate area between the safeties and linebackers, like you said? What do you think is the root cause of that overall?
Well, I think one of the causes is, as you know, Eric, the Bills actually like to play their defensive ends a little bit tighter, right? They don't play a lot really wide. A lot of the play action is getting the quarterback out in space. That's where they're getting hurt. If you watch some of these plays, it's not just play action dropping back and throwing. It's play action moving out of the pocket. Someone comes across. And because the Bills play their defensive ends a little bit tighter, it's harder to defend that. And you're going to have guys at the second level and corners. You can put them in conflict and they're going to have to try to defend that. So I think that's part of what we're seeing right here. And the other might be simply that they're not game planning necessarily. You could really get some tells with play action and what teams like to do if you're game planning them and say certain personnel's on the field, this type of look, we're going to look for a play action right there. And honestly, the other part is we've talked about Ryan Nielsen and his impact. If they're going to send some guys, they're going to blitz. Well, guess what? You're going to get caught a little bit there because if you're vacating your area as a linebacker, somebody's coming right in there. You little play action, bam, you pop it over, and it's right there. But I think some of that stuff is the boot that hurt them. Remember last year, the boot hurt them. They did button up the screen a little bit Sunday. That was good.
Yeah,
they got hurt on the screen.
Much better awareness.
Yeah, they buttoned up that. So maybe they can, work on that aspect going into next week against Tampa too.
I talked about how last week they ran a lot of single high, cover 3, and anytime they had a cross or on a play action or a bootleg, that post safety, such as Cam Lewis last week, will come cut it, and then the backside corner would replace him over the top. Well, they struggled on 2 of the big play action plays to do that yesterday. The first time was DeMar Hamlin, where they hit the rookie wide receiver Burden across the middle there for 22 yards. And then I think it was Hancock later in the game. Again, no. It was Trey Herndon, the guy that just picked up.
Yes.
He didn't slice and cover the crosser, and they were able to get it into the flats. But I also think that Dorian Williams, when he's trying to insert into that run fit on those, it was like a fake pitch or a long outside zone away from him, he allowed the crosser to sneak in front of him and by him for some easy passes. So it's something that they definitely have to button up. And if they want to defend the run to pass a lot better in coming weeks. But let's talk about how important the safety position is, because I think, once again, a lot of fans don't realize how important Taylor Rapp is to this and to this exact same thing. The communication was not good in the secondary. It was the entire secondary overall was disoriented in my opinion. So I want to ask you, what will the coaches be looking for when evaluating the film of the back 7 in this game against the Bears?
Yeah. So going back to your question a minute ago about, play action, you bring up a great point. The thing I didn't mention, but you're right, is it's also communication, right? That's a lot of it, play action and what you see and, who's got what. And you have to, it's not always verbal communication, right? It's nonverbal communication. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to, and yes, I have actually talked to Matt Milano. He does speak sometimes. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard about this point, that they know what each other's doing without having to tell each other, right? Like they understand what each other is going to do based on a certain look. They don't have to communicate. You can have a nonverbal, or you just know. Like he knows his job. I know my job. We've done this long enough that we see this. We're seeing the same thing. Right now, the Bill safeties aren't seeing the same thing. I think I think that's exactly what's happening here. And because I think Cole Bishop, because he's newer, he hasn't had this time on task. I think Cole Bishop is seeing what he's seeing and trying to figure out what he's seeing. Taylor Rapp, he's the quarterback back there. If you go back and listen to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane talk about Taylor Rapp back at the owners' meetings, Sean McDermott basically said that Taylor Rapp is Terrell Bernard of the secondary. He sets these guys. He knows what he's seeing. He's trying to, align everybody, tell everybody what's going on. I think Taylor Rapp is trying to see the big picture, where Cole Bishop, and I know Cole did not play well last night. I'm not here to make an excuse for him, but he's a young player who's trying to figure out what he's seeing all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it's harder for him right now to kind of get to where that is. Why did Micah and Jordan work for so long together? Because they were veterans. They knew each other. They played alongside. Why does Sean McDermott talk about time on task? That is why. Yeah. So the communication piece is really big, but part of the communication piece, it's just nonverbal. It's not talking to each other. It's knowing each other's roles.
Yeah, that rapport is incredibly important to that safety position. And like I said, I think the second level, we're talking Taron Johnson, Matt Milano, and Bernard, they're actually the playmakers of the defense. The safeties on the backside, currently, right now, the way it stands, are safeties in its truest form. They're the last line of defense. Whereas when Poyer and Hyde were here, they had played so often together. They knew all the ins and outs of the defense, the weaknesses, where offenses want to attack, and they could play off of each other. Like two really good players, they could play off each other, where if one makes a mistake, the other one can erase it because he knows and senses what's happening in front of him, not just on the play, but the guy that's next to him. And I think that's why you always hear McDermott talk about Bishop and kind of call him out in public and say, he needs experience. He needs playing time, because that is how important it is to the communication and rapport for the safeties in this defense.
It's funny. It reminds me when I was younger and the Bills were in their Super Bowl years, And back then they had free safety and strong safety. You really don't do that anymore, right? It's too, and Leonard Smith was the Bills' strong safety, and he would lay the wood, right? And then Mark Kelso was the Bills' free safety, and he was just super cerebral. And I remember there was a time where the Bills were getting beat like on post patterns and just some deep passes. I went over and I was in high school, and my old defensive coordinator, his name is Carl Curris, Cleveland Hill, by the way. Go Eagles! All right, Cleveland Hill High School, right there.
Nice.
My old defensive coordinator, Carl Curris, who he founded the Trench Trophy, that we do every year.
Yeah.
And I went up to him and I said, Coach, I said, how come I watch the Bills and like, why do they get beat on these deep passes, especially down the middle? And he said to me, he said, listen, he said, Leonard Smith just wants to blow people up, right? He just wants to go in. He wants to hit people. That's what he does. He's a strong safety. He said, but when he does that, he's like, Mark Kelso has to cover for him if he vacates and he's not fast enough to get there. And it kind of really, that I was young and that's when I learned. I played safety, and that kind of really started to really conceptualize for me how important it is to know if that guy's doing that. And I can't leave my guy. Like I got to know, my guy's got to know what I'm doing, and I got to know what he's doing. Right. And now you advance on, Erik, it's different these days. There's not a strong safety and free safety. They're both doing the same roles. Right. So it's not like Leonard Smith back in the day going up and all the time trying to be at the line and hit people, and Mark Kelso having to play free safety and cover for him. Now it's like, we got to do this in concert with each other. And we don't want to show the offense what we're doing, by the way.
Right. Yeah. It's so important for this defense. And I think the staff has tried to make that known to us, whether you're in the media or fans or analysts. And so let's talk about Bishop. He's the big talking point right now, but I want to start with some context to the touchdown that they scored on him.
Okay.
3rd down, 5 yards to go. It was man coverage. And this is the matchup that the Bills chose in this game. Again, keep in mind, how often do they game plan for preseason games? How much do they game plan?
0 to 1.
0 to 1. Okay. So 3rd and 5 here, 11 personnel by the Bears. It's a 3-by-1 formation, 3 receivers to one side, backside tight end. Okay. So the cornerback, Dorian Strong, the rookie corner, was matched up on the backside of this formation versus Cole Kmet, the tight end. And then you had the cornerback on the boundary to the bottom of the screen near us was Dane Jackson versus Moore, DJ Moore. Then you had the nickel cornerback, Hodgington, versus Odunze in the slot. And then, of course, Bishop, the safety, versus Zacchaeus, who's a really speedy player. Now, normally, Sal, if you're in man coverage, you're playing corners over, where Dorian would carry to the passing strength. He would be matched up on a wide receiver instead of a tight end on the backside. Normally, Bishop or a safety would be matched up on Kmet on the backside of that formation. But just that right there, that context tells you that, one, the Bills didn't really game plan for the Bears in this way. And honestly, they did the same thing later on a high leverage situation where they put Trey Herndon, the guy they just picked up against, was it the rookie wide receiver? Yeah, it was a rookie wide receiver running the option route, getting the 1st down. It just goes to show that, yes, Bishop struggled by over leveraging that switch release and that guy and playing too far outside, giving the inside lane to that receiver for the touchdown. But it also shows that, again, the Bills weren't really worried about game planning, and they just want to see if the guys can sink or swim.
And for the Bears' point, they see that, right? They see the matchup. You're talking about matchups that they know that they can exploit right there. So no doubt about it. It's a great point you make, right? Which is, do we see that same look if the two teams are playing a regular season game? No, you're not going to see that same look. I'm not telling you the result wouldn't be different. Maybe it is. Right. Maybe the Bears still score. I don't know. But I certainly give the Bills a much better opportunity and chance if this is a regular season game, because they're thinking about how do we want to defend it when they line up like this.
So Carl wants to know, how long will it be before we admit that Cole Bishop is a bust and that Damar Hamlin is a better safety? Hamlin may not be as fast, but he is smarter. I mean, I don't think Carl's really bending the truth here. I think Damar Hamlin is a better safety at this point, but they want more from that position. They invested in Cole Bishop, obviously with an early draft pick. Sal, what's your thoughts on this? Hamlin, Bishop, and again, the safeties overall?
I think that this is a floor ceiling type issue. Damar Hamlin's floor is right now higher than Cole Bishop because he understands the system. He understands where he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to do. But his ceiling is also lower. I think once Cole Bishop understands everything and feels comfortable, I think his ceiling is higher and he can make plays. I think he's more of a playmaker. He can be. He's a better athlete overall. And I think you'll see that. And they can play him in different ways. But he's got to get the basics down first. He's got to understand exactly where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there. But look, thoughts about safety. I think Jordan Hancock deserves a little more of a look here now. Jordan Hancock has looked good over 2 weeks. He did get injured. He was playing nickel when he got hurt on that play, by the way. They were playing him at nickel when he hurt his shoulder. He told reporters after he thinks
Yep.
he'll be okay, but he's still got to get it looked at. We'll see. I think Jordan Hancock has to start entering the discussion here if the Bill with safety of the Bills. He's been playing mostly safety now, not nickel, although they're working him there. They do have Cam Lewis, who's been injured. He can still be your backup nickel. He's a safety as well. But would it shock me if I started seeing this week or during the Tampa game them getting a longer look at Jordan Hancock to see if he might be the guy that they need to start playing more next to Taylor Rapp? No, it wouldn't.
Oh man, I love this discussion. Before we kind of go on with it, Jason has a question for you, Sal. Is preseason actually tougher on your schedule and sleep than regular season? Appreciate all the hard work both of you put in. Love this series and the other content you guys do. Awesome, Jason. He's an OG. He's always been very, very thoughtful to cover one and always in the chat, keeping things going.
Listen, it's last night was a little tough. We didn't land until like 3:30 Eastern time, and then have to get on the air. But I'll tell you, it doesn't matter if it's preseason or regular season. That's kind of what a day after a game is always about for me, right? It's like the game ends and you just have to go to work and you have to grind. But we love what we do. We talk about football. I appreciate it. I would say this is a good question, Jason, that I always tell people this. Everybody thinks that like in the off season, like, oh, the off season, you get to relax. No. I actually prefer the off season is when things can happen. You never know. And you have to go to work. Like you could sign a guy and make a trade. Then you have the draft, you have combine, you have owners meetings. Everything's on a different schedule. Football is such a routine game, as Erik knows, week to week routine. Now I know the Bills play primetime games and things like that, but Jason, at least during the season, I know what my Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday looks like every week because it's the same every week.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that once the regular season does start, we'll have even a better baseline of when we're recording because we've been moving things around to make things work. But Jason, great question. Appreciate that. Now let's get back to the Hancock segment because he's our tapped in player presented by Thin Man Brewery. And I want to have a great discussion about him and whether he can challenge someone for the starting position at safety. You mentioned Cam Lewis. Do you think he can actually jump over Cam Lewis as his role and, kind of Swiss Army knife type player that can play safety or nickel or anywhere else, really? Do you think he can jump him into a starting position early in the year, or maybe is that something that we kind of like put in the back pocket till later?
Yeah, I don't think so yet. And I'll refer to what Bobby Babich said about Cam Lewis and about Jordan Hancock maybe 2 weeks ago at training camp. Now it's 2 weeks ago, so Jordan Hancock's grown since then. There's no doubt. But when he was asked about Jordan Hancock and he was talking about trying not to put too much on his plate and, they want him to learn both, but he kept saying he's a rookie. He's a rookie. He said he called him the night before and he talked about the details, dude. You're looking good, but the details. And then he said, listen, there's a guy right next to him in the room he needs to learn from. Cam Lewis. Cam has done it. We use him in all these different roles, and that's exactly how he needs to operate, basically. And that showed me how much they still love Cam Lewis. I think at the end of the day, Erik, I think what we're seeing here is Jordan Hancock, yes, over, outperforming or being over the top of Cam Lewis as a safety. Okay. I think Cam Lewis then fits in as the backup nickel. Brandon Beane has called Cam Lewis the best backup nickel in the league before. I think what we might see is maybe they both get a true position with the ability to play the other, but you're not going to put that on them unless you need to.
Great point. And I think we've kind of seen that with the way they've brought Hancock along. I know, in the second half, they had put him in at nickel and he got hurt there, but it did seem like they were like, okay, start to focus on safety overall throughout camp. But overall, he came in pretty quickly after the pitch count, as Bishop was kind of yanked out of the game. And I thought he did a good job in the run and pass game. He had some really nice triggers from depth to come in and make tackles for loss in the backfield. I think he also had some learning experiences in this game. There's a play in the red zone where a crosser came and I think it was backside wide receiver came on a crosser. Dane Jackson was over the top of man coverage. He was supposed to jump in front of that and he thought he did, but he really was trying to like test Bajent, who I thought was playing lights out. He tested him to make him throw into a tight window and he sure did, right over the top of Hancock. And I thought he could have done a better job of getting in that passing window, but some nice tackles, up near the box when he's up against a tight end and they're running the ball. Then, one play he makes a tackle in the back line in the red zone. And then the next play he gets cracked for a touchdown. So some ups and downs, but I do think overall he was locked in when we're talking run or pass. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with him going forward, not just in the last game, but going forward as the season begins.
Yeah, and by the way, real quick, I'll address this one here. Not here. Tim says, "I'd love to keep Cam and Hancock. I don't think you have anything to worry about there, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both going to be on the team. So
Yeah.
that was just talking about. They love Cam Lewis, and he's also a very big part of their special teams, by the way. And I think Jordan Hancock would have to be. The thing I think about Jordan Hancock, though, Eric, that really helps him too. I think he's more physical than they thought he was.
Mm.
I think he's showing a little bit more physicality than maybe early on even and what they thought he was, and in a good way, and like having a little bit more, when he gets to the party, he's not the biggest dude, right? But
Right.
he's willing to stick his nose in there. It's actually how he got hurt in the game. He went and he had a nice tackle, but took one on the shoulder there.
I think that what we've seen from him in college and his film was that he has the mentality to, again, like you saw in this game, come from the safety depth. Again, too high looks where they're in quarters coverage and you actually have to fill in the C or D gap. You can see him do that from depth. You saw him do it from the alley, from the post, or fill that alley on a run. You see him do it. You saw him do it in the box. And so, yeah, I do think, to your point, he's got the mentality, and you're seeing it not just from depth, but you're seeing it in the box. That it's the same thing. It's very infectious. Guys like Taron Johnson, who will fire their gun and make tackles and risk their body and go make a tackle. Cam Lewis is the same way, especially when he's at nickel. He's not scared to come in and fill that C gap, just like you saw yesterday from Hancock in that game.
No, and was asked here about the corner depth. Corner's an interesting spot because Max Harrison, they have to make a decision. I think, next Tuesday, by the way, is the 53-man roster deadline. So what I think is going to happen, I'm going to make the prediction right now, Eric, and I don't know this, but what I think is going to happen as I sit here now, it makes sense that they will make Max Harrison one of those 2 IR to return guys on cut down day. So then he goes on IR for 4 weeks. He can still come back and you don't have to put him on the 53. That's the new rule as of a couple of years ago. That saves you a roster spot. So I think that's what they'll do with Max Harrison as we sit here now. So you have Tre'Davious White opposite Christian Benford. There's some concerns about White, but we'll see.
Sure.
Tre'Davious did not have a good day Friday. There was a day at practice. I thought he was the best player in the field. So, I think there's been some ups and downs. And then behind these guys, you still have obviously Jamarcus Ingram, who has played a lot of different roles for this team at dime safety, nickel corner, boundary corner. Dorian Strong can play on the outside. Dane Jackson. The odd man out might be Dane Jackson because I don't see them waiving Dorian Strong, because if they do, anybody can claim him.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? He's a draft pick. I don't think that's going to happen. Could Jamarcus Ingram be pushed off the roster? Yes, but I think his position flex is so important to them, and Dane Jackson doesn't offer that if I had to predict right now, I think Dane Jackson could be the odd guy out.
I think that's fair. Even though we have seen Ingram kind of play late into games, kind of, a signal of hey, maybe he's on the fringe. I do think his positional flexibility and, again, that scrappy mentality. He's another one of those guys that is just scrappy. He's always around the ball. He's always competing. And I do think that Dane has had a rough preseason overall. I think he's been targeted a bunch. And has he fought? Absolutely. But I think too many big plays are still happening at that catch point where he's not able to get his head around and make plays on the ball consistently. And I think that could cost him in the end. So aside from Jordan Hancock, who we have as our tapped in players, or anyone else that you want to nominate for this segment?
Yeah, I want to nominate Frank Gore Jr. He once again led the team in yards from scrimmage. I think that's 2 weeks in a row, if I remember correctly from last week. This time he had 50 yards, 51 yards rushing, 30 yards receiving, 81 total yards from scrimmage, average 6 yards a carry. The only blemish was, and it's a big blemish, that fumble. Obviously, he's in the red zone. Eric, he was securing it for the contact in front of him. He didn't see the guy coming from behind him with the peanut punch down, right? So that's just something he's got to take care of. Talk to him about it afterwards. He knows that. He said that. But I thought he ran well again. And the thing about Frank Gore, he's in the situation where I don't think anybody thinks Frank Gore is going to make the 53-man roster simply because of who's in front of him, right? You have James Cook, you have Ray Davis, you have Ty Johnson. They're not keeping 4 regular running backs on the roster. So what happens to Frank Gore? He gets released. Any team can claim him. Most teams are not going to claim a running back off the 53.
Right.
Because they like their own guys. They've been in their system. You have to keep these guys, you got to have to learn a whole new system. They like their guys. They develop. It's just about, making sure you keep your guys in house. But B, let's remember, if any player gets claimed, he has to immediately go to that team's 53-man roster. They have to have a spot for him.
Yeah.
You can't just put him on the practice squad.
No,
You got to put him on. So it's tough. And that's why I know the fear for a lot of people. You see a guy, Tyrell Shavers, whoever it is, and say, boy, I don't want to lose that guy. And I get it, but it's harder than you think for teams to just say, we're going to pluck a guy and bring him on our roster.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategy when it comes to roster construction and plucking guys off other practice squads or guys making it through waivers and whatnot. I do agree. Frank Gore, he's been great, much like last year, in the run and pass game. His ability to like maneuver in tight spaces, whether you're talking inside the box or making guys miss once he catches the ball in the flats and getting up the field. I thought he looked really good this week and last week for that matter. He is, again, one of our tapped in players for this week against the Bears, along with Jordan Hancock. And this is sponsored by Thin Man Brewery. Big things are brewing at Thin Man. The fan favorite Pils Mafia is getting a bold rebrand and is bringing back up Mafia Light. Make sure to look around in Western New York, Buffalo, and Rochester markets to pick up this. It's Mafia Light's. It's different. It's great for summer because it's only 3.5% ABV and only 80 calories per 12-ounce can. Drinks like water with notes of beer. It's the first craft Pilsner of its kind, brewed and packaged here in Western New York, a true game changer for local beer lovers. So once again, Jordan Hancock, Frank Gore, our tapped in players for the week, courtesy of Thin Man Brewery. We appreciate them sponsoring this show for the next year and being there with us. We're going to have some cool things lined up in the future with them at Thin Man. So once again, thank you for joining us this year. So with that said, a couple other things I want to get some of your thoughts on. It's the competition update at quarterback, the backup quarterback position. What were your thoughts on this game, first to second half?
I think what people saw last night is something that we've talked about before, right? Which is Mitch Trubisky just offers a lot more mobility at quarterback than Mike White. And if you're in a situation where you have to turn to the backup quarterback, it's never ideal, obviously, especially because you have Josh Allen and if he's out. But last night was a real tough night, I thought, for the offensive line at times. And Mitch Trubisky at least kept plays alive. It's tough for Mike White to do that. Mike White was not helped by his O-line. He was not helped by drops. Elijah Moore had 2 drops, right? But Mitch Trubisky did a good job of navigating a little bit of that. And I think that might be a big reason why he could still be ahead of him. Look, if you keep Mike White clean and he has a clean pocket and he drops back, he can sling it. There's no doubt. It's going to be a little bit, you might throw 1 or 2 to the other team, but he might make some wild throws to your team. Mitch Trubisky, he's not going to have those wow moments as much, but he's going to kind of keep you on schedule a little bit because he's able to move around. He's able to kind of keep the chains going. So I thought that was something that I saw. And, nothing's shown me right now that they believe that Mike White can take over the backup spot to Mitch Trubisky. I need to see the team act in that manner before I'm ready to say that.
I totally agree. I think Mike White showed in this game that he lacks the ability to manipulate the pocket or buy time, whether it's in the pocket or getting outside of the pocket. There was some inaccuracies still showing up. You didn't get the splash plays from him that you want to see in this offense. And there was one play, it was 3rd and 5, where the Bills ran their mesh rail. So they have those crossers kind of rubbing so that the defenders kind of bump into each other against man coverage. He had a running back wide open in the flats on 3rd and 5, which is the first read in this progression. And he missed him and ended up taking a sack on that play. You said it, Trubisky. It's not always pretty, but he extended plays. I thought he handled the blitz and pressures really well. He had one where he was throwing hot to the running back in the flats. It was batted down, but his head was in the proper spot and where the hot was. And then on that 3rd and 18 play where he gave Shavers a shot, that was an alert call. He saw a single high safety. He gave the alert call to send Shavers deep, and he gave Shavers a shot, and they drew a flag on that play. So I thought his head was in the game properly, and his eyes were in the right spots. It's not always going to be pretty, but he can get you out of a jam, just like you saw against the Bears.
I know I hear this all the time. It goes back a while. Like, people get upset that why haven't the Bills invested in a better, number 2 quarterback? And sure, could they have someone better than Mitch Trubisky or Mike White? I'm not here to argue that that isn't the case, but there's a couple of factors at play you have to understand about roster construction. Okay. Number 1, there's only so much money to go around. To get a better guy, to get a guy that's really going to come in and, okay, this is a guy that can really play in this league, you got to pay him more, right? Like, you're not going to get, and the Bills they're not going to do that because they have to pay other guys who are actually playing. Josh Allen, knock on wood, folks, has the longest current active starting streak in the NFL. He doesn't plan on missing any games, right? So we're not going to pay him. This isn't a situation where you got to always have a ready backup quarterback available that you better be paying some money because he's got to go in and play. The second point is, are the Bills really any different than pretty much any team in the league. Give me any team that's really good, especially take out their starting quarterback. What do they have behind them? I mean, the drop off to the next guy is very substantial. That's just the way it works in the NFL.
I gotta agree, and I'm with you. I think Trubisky is still QB2. I was starting to think that Mike White was building up some momentum, but I think just what Trubisky brings athletically, when we're talking inside and outside of structure, it's hard to look away from him when this offense needs some of those explosive plays, some of those plays where you're going to make something up, you play above the scheme than what's designed. I think Trubisky has some of that, whereas Mike White has not shown that he can do that. So let's end this last segment with arrow up and down. We can go back and forth. I want to hear some arrow up players and arrow down players from this game.
Well, I wrote my column at WGR550.com. You can go find it. And I gave some arrows up and arrows down. We talked about Jordan Hancock a little bit. We talked about Frank Gore. I'm going to give another arrow up to Brad Robbins, the punter, one of the lone bright spots of the Bills in this game. He punted 6 times. He put 2 of them inside the Bears' 20-yard line. He averaged 40.8 yards per punt. This is a guy that's really self-aware, by the way, Eric, because we talked to him after the game. He said, I read things and heard things about me, and the knock was I don't have a big leg. And I really worked on having a big leg. He's had a big leg this preseason, by the way. Yeah. But more than anything, he's doing a good job of directional kicking. He's pitting it. And I think that's what the Bills need out of their punter, right? So I like that there. And arrow down, I did not like the day Brian Vandermark had. 2 false start penalties to start. He got beat a little bit later as well. And I know that, I think he's still going to be, a player they're going to rely on this year. But I mean, Elijah Moore dropped 2 passes and he didn't help his quarterback when he dropped 2 passes.
Yeah, those are good ones. I'd add for arrow down, Andreessen. We talked about him and really talked him up the last couple of weeks. But you're seeing some of those weaknesses kind of be magnified now that teams see more and more film of him. He consistently loses receivers and tight ends behind him, whether they're on crossers or those bender routes down the seam. I think when it comes to, again, playing up and down the line of scrimmage versus the run, his processing is very, very good. But the game is still a little too fast when it comes to reading route concepts, the layers to those route concepts, and understanding where the weaknesses are in the coverages and how the opposing team is going to attack them. You saw the one play where it's 4th down. He does a great job of taking over the crossing route from Dane Jackson. All right. So he's taking the crosser. Dane Jackson replaces him in the middle. And then as soon as the quarterback agent breaks the pocket, he immediately goes into that top down mentality. I got to come downhill. He comes downhill and drops his guy in coverage, and they are able to convert. So I think that play right there was a microcosm of, his inability to play fast. That game speed is just a little behind when it comes to playing coverage.
Yeah, and I saw a clip going around on the run play near the goal line where he shoots the A gap and he doesn't make the tackle. And I'm not going to knock him for that. I mean, he did a good job to shoot the A gap. If anything, take a look at what happened to the DBs on that play. Go check what happened to the DBs on play. They got washed down and they got cracked and they got blocked. I mean, that's not on Joe for missing the tackle. Would you love for Joe to have grabbed them by the ankle? Sure. But that's a play. So a lot of times you have to kind of watch the entire 11 and see what's happening on the field.
Yeah, no doubt. The Bills DBs, corners on those duo runs, especially in those short yardage situations where the defense is a man coverage, so everything's condensed, and they just get washed down. That does happen from time to time. It's going to happen. So another guy, I'm going to stay on the defensive side of the ball, who I thought had an arrow up, but it didn't start out pretty. It was TJ Sanders, defensive tackle. I thought on the first couple of drives, especially the first drive against the starting offensive line of the Bears, he was blown off the ball, and you could see him struggling to read the blocking concept. When you have a guard and tackle, because he's that 3 tech, you have a guard and tackle, you're trying to read the footwork as a ball snap to get an idea what type of blocks are coming at you. I thought he struggled, but then as the game went on, I thought he did a good job of playing faster, retracing over the top of Walker when he was double teamed, coming down the line of scrimmage to make tackles. I thought he was great as a pass rusher. Again, this is kind of where his calling card is going to be early on. Some quick wins, especially challenging each edge, starting outside of the guard, but then challenging him inside as well. And a really nice speed of power move where he just, long armed the guy, drove him into the face of the quarterback, creating disruption out the middle. I thought TJ Sanders looked really good as that game went on.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. Landon Jackson had a better day. He had a better
Mm,
day than he did last Sunday.
yeah.
You know, it wasn't like he was making splash plays, but he had a couple pressures. He was noticeable. So I like his progression, at least coming from there. And then Michael Hoyt. We have a lot of people talking about Michael Hoyt. And yeah, Michael Hoyt, I think, in fact, what I'll say is Michael Hoyt's going to be really important to this team. And it's
Mhm.
getting, now you wish you had him for the first 6 games.
I know.
Pops Mafia says, how can Hoyt be suspended for 4 games, but Rice gets no suspension? Well, it's actually 6. He's
6. Yeah.
suspended 6 games, and I don't think the Rashee Rice thing is set in stone. They're going through that right now. He will get suspended, I believe, at some point, but it is a 6-game suspension. And Eric, at this point, I'm thinking, man, this guy looks really good. I'd love to have him for the first 6 games for the Buffalo Bills because I think they're going to have some plans for him. And I like the game. I think he's had 2 nice back-to-back
Mm.
preseason outings.
Yeah, I think the only blemish yesterday was he kind of allowed the ball to get on the edge on at least one of the runs. The other one should have been a hold on him, but overall, he's been that motor, that engine. He's
Mhm.
been doing a little bit of everything. I love your point about Jackson. I watched him really quickly before we went live, and I thought he did a good job of containing some of those bootlegs and at least forcing the pass to be thrown quickly. One got outside on him, but aside from that, I thought he did a good job. But how he varied his speeds and pass rush line to the quarterback really progressed and developed as the game went on. And he was able to start to vary up the speeds, vary up his line. And what I mean by that is he'd rush up the field, but then kind of stab inside to make that tackle, stop his feet, and then attack out wide. I thought he did a good job of challenging the edges inside and outside of the tackles in this game as that second, third, and fourth quarter really progressed. And you saw some of that length being used too, not just in the run game, but the long arm from the right end position. He started using his long arm. And now if he can just take that long arm, because that tackle was so threatened up the field by him, he stuck out the long arm. If he can just throw that guy by as he's kind of walking back and kick sliding back, he can flatten right to the quarterback. You saw that almost happen with him and TJ Sanders kind of converging on the quarterback. But unfortunately, Bagent got outside of the pocket on that play. I thought he did a great job. I think PFF has him currently with 5 total pressures in that game. Landon Jackson, 11.4 pass rush productivity rating, and a 13.6% win rate. All very good numbers for a guy that struggled in the first game of the preseason.
You know, a guy I'd give an arrow up to, but he's not on the Buffalo Bills, is Bagent. Like you said,
He was a
I love
baller
his
yesterday.
game, man. I love his game.
So much fun.
Yeah, he was fun to watch when the Bills played them a couple of years ago as well. I'm like, this guy, man, Shepherd University or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but you know, you love those underdog stories. So that was nice. Yes, I know it's against the Buffalo Bills, but when you see guys like that and they're balling and they're fighting for their NFL lives, I love it.
What about Shavers? What'd you think about Shavers' game against the Bears?
Okay, so I think Shavers played well, and he actually, Eric, there was a gunner drill basically going on during the scrimmage, not scrimmage, the joint practice, and they were doing a punt drill, and they had a gunner, and the gunner would have to go against the 2 DBs, and I've never ever in my life seen sidelines go crazy for gunners like this. They were just going crazy, like it was a game within a game.
Yeah.
And Shavers was matched up, and they put him at gunner, and he had 2 DBs on him, and the first guy he just gets into and he sheds him. I'm like, okay. And then he kind of just does an up and under swim move over the other guy who tried to come over the top. And he runs right to the ball carrier. And the Bills sideline is going crazy. I mean, they're going crazy for him. And he flexes, you know, I'm like, okay, which is great because we know Shavers, we know he can play wide receiver. And if he can carve out a role on special teams, that would really help his cause. But the issue is, I just don't know if he does enough to make the roster. He can play in the NFL. He can play wide receiver. Are there enough snaps for him to justify keeping him as a wide receiver? Because those fifth, and really, if you're going to keep a 6th guy, especially, they have to play special teams. And if he doesn't do enough, and if he doesn't offer the ability to do that, I don't know if he can be kept. It's a tough call. I hate saying that because I love watching Tyrell. And he also wears number 80 like I did in high school. So I love Tyrell. But I don't know if that can be the case. It's going to be a tough call.
Yeah, that's disappointing because again, I think for wide receiver, he's developed tremendously. The QBs trust him. Obviously, everyone roots for him, whether he's on special teams or in the wide receiver room.
Yep.
Plays big outside the numbers. I thought yesterday his releases at the line of scrimmage were sneaky explosive. Like his ability to kind of stab inside and then just accelerate, like sneakily accelerate outside and release to go on those go routes or even some of those 50-50 balls. Or he's running, he makes it look like a fade until it's not, snaps it off. And he's getting the ball, you know, from the quarterback who anticipated him snapping it off I think he's got a lot of what the Bills need as a role player for an X-type player, whether it's behind Palmer and Keon Coleman. But I'm with you. I think he's got to make some splash plays in the special teams to really, really solidify himself on a roster spot on this. So aside from Shavers, anyone else arrow up, down that you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, I think that's it from my end. We'll be watching to see how they handle Saturday. No media availability today from Sean McDermott. I believe he will talk to us before they practice tomorrow, and they'll have 3 straight days of practice and then head to Tampa on Friday.
Awesome. Good to hear. Another great show. The engagement in the chat box was amazing today, guys. We appreciate you joining us. Again, it was a kind of an odd, wonky hour start, but we're happy to bring this recap to you guys as quick as we can. Give Sal some time off because he's been going nonstop, as you guys heard. It's nap time for Sal, so we wanted to hammer this out. But on behalf of Turf to Tape, presented by Thin Man Brewery, I'm Erik Turner. That's El Capaccio. We'll see you on the next breakdown.